So very much, Hung, fellow Toastmasters honored guest. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend, Zhana. Zhana is an amazing woman. She came here from Russia. She is an entrepreneur. She has started her own business. She is a successful songwriter and musician. And she actually came to Toastmasters knowing that she could tell stories through songs, but wanting to be able to tell stories orally. I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Zhana.
Thank you, Jane. It's always an honor and immense joy to speak in front of a group of ambitious people. And each and every one of you here is ambitious because ambition, by definition, is the desire and determination to achieve success. And we all here are Toastmasters, and the joint goal is to become a better communicator and a better speaker. What really unites us all is the open heartedness. This is open heart to achieve more, to be more, and to extend and expand ourselves. So today I'm going to speak about one of the powerful tools that I personally discovered many years ago that worked for myself and worked for many others, celebrities, executives, you name it, people you very well know. And of course, I'm talking about a power of a vision board. You see behind me a collage of pictures. And of course, you cannot see them, but wait until I'm going to show you some personal examples from my personal life. But first things first, raise your hand if you would like to become a little bit a magician who can turn your wildest dreams into your tangible reality. Would you like to know how to do this? Okay, thank you so much. I am in the same room of enthusiastic and driven people. So let's begin. First, let's start with the definition of what a vision board is. In my world, this is what it is. It's a framework, simply a framework for tackling your next big dream. You can call it a vision, you can call it a dream. By the way, a vision board by itself sometimes is called an action board. You can call it a dream board, you name it. Don't get hung up on the word. And sometimes we don't even know why things work. We just know they work. But I'm going to give you a little bit of the scientific explanation because I know we have a lot of right brainers in the room and they really, really just thrive on scientific facts and data, including me sometimes. So why do vision boards work? From neuroscience, we know there's a lot of study that has been done that there's a notion and a process in your brain that is called value tagging. What it means is when you are looking at images, not the written word works too, but if it's the image or the picture that you are looking at consistently, then your priority and opportunities for getting that, what is on the picture, is moving up in value from your subconsciousness to your consciousness. So knowing that, of course, we can take advantage of that. And that's why people create vision boards. Many years ago, it just so happened that my first business and personal development coach used to be John Assaraf. If you're familiar with the name, he's pretty well known. You can find him on YouTube. And by the way, let me just inject right here that I did create a handout for everybody to take a look at, and Abhijit gracefully and graciously agreed to share it in the chat at the end of the presentation. So I really want you to listen to it rather than taking notes. You're going to get everything what I'm going to share with you today. So going back to what I was going to tell you about John Assaraf. In 2000, he moved into a new house, and 2 or 3 days after he moved to the new place. His then 5-year-old son came up to him in the morning, looked at this unpacked boxes and said, "Daddy, Daddy, what's in that box?" And Daddy looked at him and said, "Kian, this is actually labeled my vision boards. So I guess these are my old vision boards." "What's a vision board, Dad?" And John looked at him and said, "Well, let me just show it to you. It's how you turn your dream into your reality." So he opens the box and he takes out the old vision board. The first one was about some kind of unimportant sort of stuff, like getting a new car or something like that, that he was already driving. And then the next one that was done by him 5 years prior to that day, he looked at it and he started crying. And the son looks at him, "Dad, what's wrong?" He says, "Nothing. These are the tears of joy. Look at that picture." And he shows the picture, and on that picture, there's the exact dream house that he just moved into. So you can't make it up. It really is a fact, just like it was true for Oprah Winfrey, who did the vision boards for many years, just like it worked for Stephen Harvey and many, many others. Sometimes the most of the executives and corporate workers, they would hide their vision boards or action boards somewhere in the closet, or you can see them on the screensavers. They would never openly talk about it, but they actually do use that process. And the process that they're using, I call it the WOW process. The WOW is very simple. It's literally how to make a successful vision board that worked for me. There are many, many, many different other ways to do it, and you can search it up on internet, but I'm going to share my way of doing it. And I can tell you that it's been the 7th year of me using that powerful tool. So the first W in the WOW, and I told you guys, you don't have to make notes. You're going to get the handout. The first WOW stands for write. Write your vision. Set the mood. If you're a meditator, go into meditation with a piece of paper if you want to. I prefer long handwriting rather than typing, but it's up to you. I know we live in Silicon Valley. Now, you write your vision, and sometimes it takes 3 pages or 6 pages. It doesn't matter. Just like the stream of consciousness, what would you like to achieve? And once you're done with that, it's literally like everything, you're getting everything out of your system onto a piece of paper. Once you're done with that, you go into this O in the word WOW, and O means organize. How do you organize your thoughts? I usually prefer to organize them by 4 basic categories, but you can create more or less depending on your needs. So my categories are: you look at what you wrote, and then you kind of either color code it or just literally create your own system, and break it up into health category, into finances or career, relationship, that would include your intimate relationships and the relationships with your colleagues, all types of relationships. And the last one would be spirituality, which is relationship with you and the source, however you want to call it. So health, relationships, career, and money. I forgot. Career is actually includes the money. So 4 categories. I think I didn't mess up on that, but it's gonna be on the handout. So after you're done with that process, you go into this last W in the word WOW, which actually stands for wow. Wow your senses. Now it's your creative process. You can grab colorful pencils. You can grab scissors. You can get the tape, and glue or whatever you're going to use. Go on the internet, find the images and of every single point of what is written on your in your process, right? In the first wow, in your vision, and then you can draw it, you can print it out, and then arrange it on your vision board the way you like it. You can categorize it. You can just do a blend. Like I usually don't use categories, they are only written in my notebook, but right here you don't see any sections. What I also do my process is like this. Every year in December, I sit down and meditate and write everything that is important for me, kind of starting planning the upcoming year. So if you see, this vision board was made in, I don't know if you can see it, 2018, right? So you create the theme for the year. And then within that theme, I call it 3 magical intentions. If you don't like the word magical, just put the bullet points or whatever you want to call it. And it's the intentions that are designed to channel your energy into something that you would like to create in your life. That is super, super important, because if you think about it, we are bombarded by thousands of pieces and bits of information daily. And to be precise, it's 34 gigabytes of information. Now, can our brain process so much? Of course not. So what we do, we focus, and with this value tagging process that I told you about before, you're moving up the important things to you, just completely blocking your mind from unnecessary bits of information. And guess what? This is not for sitting on your bottom and looking at the pictures and doing nothing. What happens magically is when you take a look at it daily, when you wake up, you look at those pictures. When you go to bed, you look at those images. And during the day, if you save it, take a picture on your phone, on your computer screen, without giving it a conscious effort, you constantly surround yourself with these images, pleasant images that you would love to, even if it's far-fetched. Then you jump into the inspired action. And then you start looking for another day. Oh my God, I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to do this. But it's not getting busy. You know how we're sometimes asking people, what have you been doing? How have you been? And people go, oh, I've been busy all the time. Well, being busy, what are you busy about? And this is going to get you somewhere where you want to go. Here is my personal example from this 2018. Look at, I'm not going to show you everything, right? Because my pictures are ambitious. Remember, I told you we are all ambitious. So Americans Got Talent, right? That picture, can you see it? Let me bring it closer. Can you guys show me thumbs up if you can see it? Thank you. All right. So America's Got Talent. That picture was on my board because it was important for me. Guess what? If you go on my Facebook page, you will find the proof that I actually did it. I went to Las Vegas and I participated because it was important to me. I was about to start my own TV show and I wanted to see behind the scenes how they are doing it. Plus, I wrote a song at that time that I knew I'm not going to go on big stage because of the concept of the song. That was not the point. The point for me was to be on America's Got Talent, to get an experience, and I did it. So that's one of the things. Now, what is related to our club and the Toastmasters journey for me? Let me just show you the other one, which is from, 2020. There you go. Oh, by the way, you can find, I just really love it. On internet, there was a lot of, especially from John Assaraf, there was a letter to 2020. Dear 2020, none of it was on my vision board. So, and by the way, it's not about the externals. It's about what matters to you. You see, last year, you see this trophy? right here. And it just so happened that my kids, by the way, for those of you who have kids or grandchildren, you can make it a family project. You write down this W, right? The first W, your vision, and then you ask them to go on internet and find the images that you would love. Then everybody is on the same page. You see the trophy, and it just so happens that Oprah is pointing at that trophy, and I was competing, and in all this club level competitions, and then I believe the area. What's the next step? The area the competition, and I won the first 3 rounds or something. To me, that's what mattered, because I never competed. I don't believe in competition. It's not something that drives me. That's just, you got to know yourself. Anyway, it worked. It worked for me. It worked for so many other people. And I told you about my wow process. Perfect timing. Now we're going to open for Q&A. And Jane, I believe, thank you, Gavin, for timing me. Jane is going to look at the chat. If you guys can put your questions, if you have any questions about the process on how to create this, go ahead. After the Q&A, I will just need 1 more minute. So either put it in.
Oh, do you recommend vision board parties or doing this solo?
Great question. Thank you so much. It's up to you. There's no right or wrong. I usually prefer to do it by myself, but when I say by myself, this is a family project. I make it as a family project because one of the workshops that I lead for women, I actually teach them how to create a team with your kids, but the kids need to want to be a part of it. If you want to throw a party with your friends with a little bit of wine or whatever your favorite drinks, go for it, even better. It's super, super cool. One resource, just to add to the answer, Julia, if you're familiar with that book, Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. That's a book for anybody who is creative, or if you are planning on writing something, not necessarily writing, it's just a great way for you to get into the creative mode. She has tons of creative exercises, and this is one of them. Thank you for the question. What's the next one?
The next one is from Karen Cornwell. Do you do a board every year?
Yes. Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. I do. Like I said, you see themes, this one, 2020, right? For me, it was important because I'm in my own business, exponential growth, and 3 magical intentions, as I call them. Then 2019, systems, creating systems that work, because I'm not thriving on being a super organized person, and because I'm a creative and I needed both. And then magical manifesting, that was 2018. The very first one was about self-love, but that was like 7 years ago. Yes, I do it every year. And then what you can do actually during the year, you look at the pictures, and it's just fun to do, because put it somewhere where you can see it, like you wake up and you literally look at it. Even if you're thinking about something else, it goes into your subconsciousness, like I said. My kids usually come into my office and say, hey mom, why are you still keeping this vision board? Can you cross out this is already, that's happened already, that's happened, let's put new pictures. So you could literally, as you go, you can add or remove the images, and it's just a fun magical process, because you're co-creating with something we don't know how it works, but it does. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Carlos, our president, would like to know, how do you arrange support from others for your vision?
Great question, Carlos. It's usually my kids. I have 2. Why is it important for me? The very first year when we did it, my son is 17. So 7 years ago, he was 10. when I said, guys, I'm going to write down everything that I would love for us to create, because you don't create for yourself. Usually the why behind this is you, your loved ones, and the universe as a whole, right? So when I said that, they said, oh, Mom, don't worry, we know what you want. And they picked out the images that I would pick for myself. When you align the whole family and everybody who matters to you, then the vision becomes the overall vision, and then they help you to achieve. It's like, don't go there. You create your support environment around you. And I can see, thank you, Carlos. I hope I answered your question. But don't worry if I did. If you have more questions on that handout that I created, that Abhijit is going to share with you guys. Thank you so much. Just feel free to let me know if you have any questions. And I just want to say that as ambitious people, I know it worked for me. This powerful tool called a vision board worked for me, worked for so many others. And I can't wait for you to try it on for size and let me know how and what you're going to create, what magic you're going to create. Let the magic begin, because I guarantee you from that point, once you do this, it gets curiouser and curiouser, like Alice in Wonderland once exclaimed. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Zhana, for sharing with us a fun way to achieve our goals. That is going to be great. I can't wait to read your detailed explanation. Next, I would like to call on Mayor Repetto to introduce our second speaker, Mayor Repetto.
Thank you. Is it possible to live a peaceful life as we face daily challenges? Our next speaker is Michael Chojnacki, who taught 20 years as an Aikido sensei in the Japanese martial arts, known for its power and grace, which teaches the way of harmony in daily life. Through his worldwide programs and webinars, Michael makes these advanced techniques easily accessible for solving people problems and giving us the peace of mind we desire. By teaching people these skills, they discover how their challenges can be the perfect opportunity for developing a life with greater meaning and purpose. Today's speech is titled A Shift in Perspective. Please join me in welcoming.
Hello, everyone. Just to make sure we have a good internet connection, everyone raise their hand if you cannot hear me. Start making a lot of noise if it goes out. Otherwise, I'm just going to plow on like a Toastmaster normally would. Why is it so difficult to make change in our lives? Well, in my life, it's because I had to give up my old mental habits to gain a new perspective. And this has happened many times in my life. Whenever I resisted change, I suffered and I kept repeating the same mistakes. But once I developed the confidence to change, life was beautiful. I have a few stories to share with you on how this happened for me. Have you ever had someone angry at you? I'm not talking about the everyday garden variety of anger where someone says, oh, you're in my parking place. I'm talking about the level of searing anger that could cut through tempered steel. That was the situation I was once in. It all started out innocently enough when my friend Angela at work suggested I apply for a leadership position. Angela said applying for the job would help her broaden her search and make the company look progressive, that we're hiring from within. Angela said, there's nothing to worry about. Besides, I didn't have all the skills, I didn't have all the qualifications, and I didn't have the sense to say no. Of course, you know what happened? I got the job. Management thought I had strong potential for leadership. Well, kind of. Things quickly went from good to worse. You see, Carrie, a coworker, desperately wanted this job and she was furious. Now, she openly admitted she was less qualified than me, especially when it came to helping people get along. But that didn't stop her. She wanted that job. When she didn't get it, she was livid. What's worse is Carrie simmered and directed all of her anger not only at me, but at everyone on the team, every chance she got. Unfortunately, I was a victim. It didn't take me long to be consumed by her anger. It absorbed my every thought. One day on a weekend when I was supposed to be home enjoying my life, I was worrying about Carrie. My wife casually walked past me and said, "Gee, why are you investing so much time and energy making yourself miserable? You know, Michael, you could be enjoying this beautiful day with me." Oh, there's no denying a woman's wisdom. She was right. Why was I burning up my life in frustration and anger? Didn't get me anywhere. It only created more anger. Well, I tried to avoid Carrie, but that didn't work. I tried anger. Anger only makes things worse. What was left? Compassion. Was that even possible? Did I have the strength to shift from frustration to compassion? How could I do it? But I needed to do it quickly. I didn't know. I thought about it, and the first thing I did was, I'm going to forget about Carrie and see the best in my fellow human beings. I'm going to shift my focus away from the problem and onto what I knew I appreciated sincerely about my fellow human beings, and especially the Toastmasters I work with all the time. Every time I saw someone from that day on, I practiced sincerely appreciating something about them. I didn't necessarily say something, how wonderful they looked or their smile lifted my spirits. I just thought about it and how grateful I was that they were in my life, improving the quality of my life. Every time I thought about Carrie, at first, I started to feel neutral, which was actually a big step in itself. And then one day I stopped myself and I said, I would rather only love exist between us. That was a thought that came from deep within. It surprised me, but it was true. Anger wasn't working. I would rather only love exist between us. Day after day, I repeated my newfound change until I felt a change in my consciousness that was true. It wasn't just an empty hope or dream or promise. It was something that shifted in me. A few months later, Carrie received an award for a prior accomplishment, and honestly, she deserved it. But we were meeting in person then, and where did I sit when Carrie received her award? In the front row center, knowing that when Carrie received the award, she would turn to the audience, and the first person she would see would be me. When Carrie accepted that award, I stood up and applauded for her as if she were my best friend, because actually, she was. In my life, she gave me the gift of learning how to overcome conflict with compassion. It's something we don't really ask for, but it was truly a gift from her. When Carrie had the award in one hand, she looked at me as if to say, "That's not fair. I'm angry at you. You're supposed to still be angry at me." But in that moment, something also changed in her. She somewhat dropped her defenses and almost smiled. A few months later, Carrie told me, "Michael, I can't believe how I treated you. And what's even worse, I can't believe you had the strength to find compassion." That was Carrie's way of apologizing. Over the years, Carrie and I worked together on several small projects. Sometimes I would look over at Carrie and see her looking at me and smiling, and then just shake her head and start to laugh. I don't think she could ever figure me out. In that situation, instead of choosing anger, I chose compassion. The next story is about kindness. One day while I was on vacation with my wife, we went to a restaurant without reservations. And since we had spent the whole day traveling, we were hungry. We walked up to the hostess at a beautiful restaurant and said, "Table for two, please." She asked, do you have reservations? Well, no, we don't. We've been traveling all day. She said, sorry, no reservations, no table. My wife and I stood there. Now we were both hungry and disappointed. We were looking so forward to enjoying a romantic dinner with a beautiful view as the sun was setting over the bay. But oh well, what can you do? But just then, 2 menus fell off the menu stand on the counter in front of me. I casually picked them up, straightened them, placed them back on the stand. And the hostess looked at us quizzically for a long moment. I'll have a table. We're table and I asked, are any tables available? Oh, she said, that's right, we're fully booked. I said, how did a table open up? Oh, they didn't. But since you were so nice, I'm going to give you one of the tables reserved for a couple that was celebrating their anniversary this evening. And for them, I'll just have them pause and I'll buy them a drink. I'll have them wait a little while. So instead of choosing disappointment, I chose kindness. We had a beautiful dinner. Understanding is the next story. Several years ago, my family was enjoying a Saturday lunch. It's typical in our home that we eat meals together. Unfortunately, on this Saturday, my wife and daughter were having a minor disagreement that erupted into, well, a slight nuclear meltdown. There wasn't anything I could do to make the situation better. So I remained silent and I hid behind my sandwich. After lunch, I went back to work remodeling our house. And at that time, our daughter was 13. Her name's Amanda. It was time for her to have a bedroom of her own. So I designed and built an addition to our home that would be her very own bedroom and bath. On that particular day, I was painting the siding. And with every stroke of the brush, I was feeling deeply grateful for the incredible family I have and thinking about how much I love my daughter, my wife, and my son. And after about 30 minutes of heartfelt gratitude, my daughter Amanda quietly walked up near me and was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Dad, I just wanted to tell you what a wonderful father you are. I looked at her and said, you're pretty amazing yourself. Instead of choosing conflict, I chose understanding. Every day we make change in our life and we face conflict. Making change can be scary, but I think what's even scarier is allowing us to hang on to the fear that's inside, which keeps us from growing and reaching our higher potential. It's true at times in my life, I've had great conflict with both men and women, young and old. But mostly, I've had great love and kindness shown to me from so many people. And I've come to realize that as tempting as it can be to respond to anger with anger or push back when people push at you, it's amazing how much we gain by responding to life's challenges with a little compassion, kindness, and understanding. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Michael. We will actually have the Q&A now for 5 minutes. It will be led by Mayor Repetto.
If you have a question for Michael, please go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand. I have everyone on you and see who has any questions. I have a question for you, Michael. How do you keep yourself centered when people upset you?
I feel great compassion for them because you know what? I suffered for decades with anger and I realized that could have been me. So I know where they're coming from. I understand how easy it is to become upset. And I realize I can observe them and realize that I don't have to absorb their anger. I can appreciate where they're coming from. And generally when people are angry, there's some truth to it. So I listen very carefully. but I remember that I can also help them through that. I don't take it personally. Even if someone says something that's true, that might not be so kind, I try not to take it personally and stay centered in my role in that relationship.
I see we have a couple of questions in the chat. So how long did it take for you to achieve being so balanced and centered?
Well, I don't think I've reached that point yet, although people often mention it to me. What I do is I truly practice seeing the best in others. Teaching Aikido for 20 years is a lot about learning to be calm and centered as people approach physically, but it also could be verbally or emotionally, and learning to just let that energy go past you and staying calm and centered. There was once a gentleman on the East Coast where a company hired me to speak there. And he said, Michael, my manager makes me crazy. He talks all day long. I feel like I have to listen to him, but he just talks about everything, politics, history, sports. He just talks and I can't work. But I feel like he has to talk to me and I have to listen. So I said, well, when he says something that's not right, just pretend that information goes past you and into the recycle can. And I said, it'll work. He looked at me, you're from California, right? I said, well, give it a try. 2 weeks later, he called me. He said, every time my manager says something that I don't agree with, I press my foot on the recycle can and remind myself as a physical reminder that that energy needs to be recycled. And it's not about me. So for me, I think that's the key. If it's not right, that it's just energy. It needs to be recycled. I'll pick out the good parts and let the other part go. And that way I stay centered in what's good in all of the relationships.
And this is a great segue to this question. What do you about political polarization and conflict in the US? Do you have any suggestions about that?
Do I have any suggestions? My greatest suggestion would be to learn to appreciate the best in others, and then you can speak about the problem. If we come to someone and we think, oh no, they have a different political leaning than I do, that's a huge barrier that exists within our own mind before we can even begin the conversation. But if I think about what all people want in life, then you realize we have more in common than we do that's separate. And if we can connect to them on what's correct and for the betterment of everyone, then we can move forward. The other thing that's huge, I think, is we don't like what someone's doing and we become upset. And when we become upset, that's a lot of intention, emotion, and dynamic focus that we put on what we don't want. Instead, we could use all of that energy focusing on what we do want, developing wonderful relationships with an incredible group of people. That's what I try to do.
I think that's a great ritual, and it segues into this question. Do you have rituals that you do daily to help you stay centered?
Yes, I meditate. I begin in the morning meditating and I meditate at night. So I begin morning in prayerful meditation and I end the evening in prayerful meditation with tremendous gratitude for all of the incredible people in my life. And I see many of them on the screen right here today. I might not have seen some of you for years. I might have seen some of you a few months ago, but I am deeply grateful for each of you. Sometimes I scroll through my Facebook listing, your listing or people you know, and Tasha, I see you smiling. I see you all the time. I think about how wonderful you are, but not to single out Tasha, but everyone. Think about everyone on the list. I scroll through LinkedIn. I have like 13 or 1400 people, and I remember them, and I think about how wonderful they are. My life is filled with incredible people, and the few people that make my life miserable, well, I try to see the best in them. It's in there someplace. I know it is.
So it is pretty hard to ignore Tosh. Pretty amazing. And this will be the final question. Do you have any offer suggestions being compassionate for all people? Do you have any specific way that we can show compassion to everyone, or a compassion practice that you follow or recommend?
Yeah, a specific way to show compassion. I think what's most important in that question is understanding how people receive us. I could say something to someone like, "Oh, Michael, your hair looks beautiful." But if Michael was been made fun of for the way his hair looked growing up, I might take that as an insult. So to understand how people receive a compliment, because that opens the door. Some people want to hear it, a verbal compliment. Some people want to be shown something or given a gift. So to understand what is important to each person in the style they receive praise or a compliment is important, because that way it's important to them. And it sets the foundation for when we communicate with them, we're on the right channel.
Perfect.
And that,
That note, perfect way to end our Q&A section. Thank you so much, Michael, for your generosity and everyone who participated.
thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you again, Michael, for an inspiring and giving us tips on compassion, kindness, and understanding. Wow, I know that will be very helpful for me. I really need it. Okay, now we will take a short break, 5-minute break. It is 2:50. Let's get back here about 2:55. So let's take a 5-minute break and come back on time sharp. Thank you.
Henry?
Yes, I'm working on it.
Sure.
Abhijit, are you there?
Yes, sir.
I need the link for Lance Miller. He's having trouble.
Sure. I'm going to give you the link, okay?
Okay.
John, I gave him the link already. He's rebooting his system. He's rebooting.
Have you just talked with him? I have an email.
I have been texting him. He's having an issue.
Okay.
So John, you can send him that link just if he wants.
All right. Let me just do that as well.
Good to have you, Gary.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah.
Abhijit?
Yes, sir.
Looks like we're still having a problem. Still not letting him in.
Okay.
Let me see if we might have to switch and to Dana if we're having a problem, and see if we can work it out if
Sure.
he's not in by 3 o'clock.
Okay.
So let me reach Dana in the chat box.
Okay.
Oh, Abby, may I ask you to save the chat so that I can answer maybe people's questions
Sure.
in the email?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Because I'm going through it. That's a lot of questions.
Yep.
So I'm not gonna. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure. No
That
problem.
handout.
Anytime, Zhana.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Abhijit?
Yes, sir.
We're good to go.
Perfect. Yeah, I see both of them.
Okay.
Perfect. They're in.
Are we ready for the second half?
It's up to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
So we'll do Lance first, correct?
I will open up and I will introduce you, John.
Okay, and we'll do Lance first.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that didn't change.
Hey, good.
Let's coordinate here for a second because I just walked in here. So last I heard Dana wasn't here, and then I just saw that he's on mute. Is Dana here? How much time do I have to talk? What are we looking at?
Hello, this is Erica. This is his assistant. I'm just connecting everything for him to be ready when you need him.
Okay.
So Lance, you will be the first speaker on the second half, and you have about 30 minutes.
Okay, great.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So welcome back, Toastmasters and guests. The next step, we learn by doing, observing, and practicing with the experts. How about not one, but two world champions of public speaking for our second half? To start off, I would like to ask John McGowan to introduce our first world champion of public speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Before I get started, I just want to say we'll have a short Q&A session at the end. So if you do have questions, you can send me by chat the questions and I'll read off the questions. Now let me introduce our speaker, Lance Miller. Lance Miller is an award-winning speaker and trainer. He has delivered over 5,000 speeches in over 60 countries, and he is Toastmasters 2005 World Champion of Public Speaking. He was instrumental in building his home club, Renaissance Speakers, to 95 members and the #4 Toastmasters club in the world. And he has worked with over 80 districts around the world, helping Toastmasters win with Toastmasters. Lance is a partner in Miller, Knudsen, and Daré, LLC, a fractional management firm specializing in business performance and growth. With his talk, Mastering Your Speech, please join me in welcoming Lance Miller.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me to your Toastmasters Club this morning or this afternoon. And also a very special shout out to Dana LaMon. Dana always holds a very special place in my heart because as I was coming into Toastmasters, the first year I was in Toastmasters, I joined in November of 1992 and Dana was the reigning world champion. It was the first world champion I ever heard speak. And I saw how high the bar was set for me when I came into Toastmasters after I saw Dana speak. And we've had some good times together. So I'm glad to be on together with you. I want to share with you today just some of the fundamental things I learned along my route to the World Championship. And if you don't know my story, it's not a story that I came into Toastmasters and within 1 or 2 years won the world championship. It took me 9 years to get out of my club to win the club contest. Now, it wasn't that I was a horrible speaker. I did have some things to learn, but also we were building one of the top clubs in the world. And I had, at the time I won at the club level, we had over 95 people in my club. And we were the number 4 club in the world in Toastmasters. And my club contest was harder than the district competition with that. But I competed at the club level for 9 years before I won it. I went to district 4 times. I went to the regions 3 times before I made it on the world champion stage. And I like to say that I lost my way to the world championship. I'm a huge proponent of Toastmaster speech competitions because I think they push us outside our comfort zone. And I learned the most by losing competitions, losing speech contests. And so when I see people get in the competitions and they get really upset, they said they're never competing again, they're not fair, all that type of communication. I just want to let you know right up front that I went through all that. And I used to go home pounding my hand on the steering wheel saying these competitions are stupid. Where do they find the judges? If I could just get in front of an audience that had a high enough IQ to understand my brilliance, I'd be fine. I don't know where they get these people. In the end, I would always dust myself off and come back. And when I look back on my path to the world championship, probably one of the biggest things I learned about life was learning how to lose and still staying on my feet. And that's where my speaking really took off, was when I was willing to lose the competition, figure out what I learned from losing it, and then apply that to my next speech. And that is where my speaking took off. So with that being said, some of the things that I struggled with were finding messages that were really my messages. I used to try to come up with these brilliant messages that the audience would think were incredible, but they had nothing to do with me. And the other thing was a lot of times in those early years of speaking, I would get on stage and I would try to be the sensational, the dynamic speaker that stood on the stage and would inspire you to climb a mountain, to cross a river, but I wasn't being me. So my first piece of advice to you as a speaker is to be yourself and just talk to the audience. And that's the hardest thing, I think, in public speaking, is to just be yourself and talk to the audience. And I remember at the spring conference in District 1, when I first heard Dana speak, I was sitting in the audience in the front row. I had just taken third in Tall Tales. And I thought my speaking career was at its peak. And then Dana came on stage. And I sat there, and I've told Dana this a number of times. I still to this day remember the speech he gave. And I couldn't figure out what he was doing that I wasn't doing, but I knew he was doing something that I wasn't doing. And the essence of what I saw Dana doing was that he was just being himself. And he was telling us stories from his life that he had found value in, and he was sharing those with us. And he wasn't yelling or shouting at the audience. And if you've ever seen Dana speak, you know that he doesn't have really good stage movement. He doesn't walk around on the stage. You know that he's got horrible eye contact with the audience. So those of you that don't know Dana, you're going to find out that he's blind. That's why he has horrible eye contact with the audience. But what was so beautiful about that experience for me was I saw it didn't take somebody running around on stage, jumping around, flailing their arms in the air. It didn't take somebody, that was animated. It took someone who was articulate, that could connect with me with their words. And as I said, I'm so thankful that Dana was the first world champion I saw who sort of set the stage for me. Okay, so my first piece of advice to you, which is not easy, is to just be yourself and talk to the audience. That's where the power is. But the thing I had to start grasping in my speaking was I was the one speaking to the audience. Now, most of my life, I'd had people telling me what to do. So when I stood up in front of the audience, I felt that I needed to take the lessons that I'd learned from other people and tell the audience about that. But all the power in speaking I found was actually finding my own lessons in life. Now, I've done a whole series on finding your voice, and I have a series, I'll just let you know, I have a series of speaking tips cards this is speaking tips. This is building a championship club tips card. This is a speech evaluation tips card. This is a leadership tips card. They're all free downloads on my website. And on the back of the speaking tips card, you can't see it real well here, but I have 10 questions that I ask myself as I went through this process of figuring out what were my messages. And it really started with, well, what's my story? Where am I coming from as an individual? What are my philosophies of life? What do I believe in? What do I really know about life that I can share with the individual, share with the audience? What are the defining moments in my life? And when I first started, I had 2 or 3 defining moments. And as I progressed through my speaking, I now have thousands of defining moments. I see lessons every day in my life that I can share with audiences. But this was a journey I went on, and it was a journey I traveled in Toastmasters. I did not go hire a bunch of speakers. I used the Toastmasters program. I spoke in the Toastmasters program. I competed. And when I won the world championship, I was a DTM and I had 17 CCs. Okay. I worked this program, but I used to do 3 and 4 speaking levels a year. Okay. So I was speaking, I was making mistakes, I was screwing things up, and I was figuring out what's my voice? And that's really probably one of the big things I wanted to learn in Toastmasters, and I wanted to learn through this experience. I had a lot of people recommending that I would go get some coaching or do some seminars, and I did some, and I got benefit from them. But the truth of the matter is, most of my life, I was being told how I was supposed to talk to people. I was being told what I should say by other people. I don't know about you, but I grew up in a relatively large family. I assume most of you grew up in a family. And there were 6 kids in my family. They were all boys, except 5 of them. So the first 18 years of my life, I was told to shut up in harmony by 5 sisters. Okay. And so you're up against this whole component. There were a number of times in my life I spoke out and I said something stupid and everybody laughed at me, or I was afraid that I'd become afraid to say something. And there were times that I stood up and tried to lead and I got attacked. And so I had this bad experience. I think this is something we all go through. But the point was, I wanted to figure out what my speaking style was, what my messages were for the world, and not emulate somebody else. So that was a lot of what my journey is. So when you look at your messages, I have downloading that material. You can do a deep dive in this on your philosophies of life. As I said, your defining moments. How do you find the extraordinary and the ordinary things in life? I have a whole series of talking points that I used to sort of peel the onion that was Lance till when I got down to that core level that I could speak from. And in the end, it was what do you really want to say? Or in my case, what did I really want to say to the audience? And what had I really learned about life that I wanted to share with the audience? And with that message was, how did I want to improve the lives of the audience? How did I want to get them to think differently and to feel differently? It wasn't about winning a ribbon. It wasn't about a plastic trophy. I've got enough plastic trophies in my garage. My neighbors, I think I'm on a bowling league. Okay, they're all Toastmasters competition trophies. But I want to share with you a little story about when this first started to come together with me. And it was the first time I won at the club level. It was in 2001. I was driving to my club and I was practicing my speech in the passenger side of the car as I drove to the meeting. I remember the stoplight I stopped at. It was at Los Feliz in Vermont here in LA. I'm waiting at the light and I'm going over the speech and I'm thinking, I don't want to give this speech. I'm going to lose the competition anyway. I might as well talk about something I want to talk about. And so I just tossed that speech out and I started rewriting another speech. I was about 7-8 minutes from my Toastmasters club, started rewriting another speech in my head. And I think I drew speaker number 8. We used to have 12 or 14 people in our speech competitions. Speaker number 8 or something like that. So I sat in the back of the room and I sort of diagrammed out a speech and what I wanted to say. And I got up and I knew I was going to lose this. I was going to lose the competition. So I wasn't trying to win it. I just relaxed and I just said, I have 7 minutes to say something to the audience and maybe make an impact on them. And that's what I did. And I won the contest. So my first piece of advice, if you're looking at competing, another piece of advice was, this is what actually was the hallmark of my speaking, was speak like you're going to lose. Because if you speak like you're going to lose, you have nothing to lose and you're just going to be yourself. All this added pressure that I've got to be something special goes away, and you just talk to the audience and touch their heart and change their mind. And I started to tap into, and this is honest to God story, I started to tap into what I saw in Dana that May of 1993 in Long Beach, California, was our life energy, our commitment, our belief in our own message. The fact that I started to embody my message just a little tiny bit. And that's where the power of the speaking was. It was, I was being true to myself, and I was truly trying to give the audience something of benefit to them. It was not about a trophy. It was about affecting the lives of the people listening to me. Okay, so I'm just going to go back over. Look at your life lessons. What are your messages? What do you really want to say to the audience? What have you learned about life? And how do you want to improve the lives of the audience? That's the hallmark of what I look at in messages. Any speech I have is, how do I want to improve the life of the audience? I am applying that today in this talk to you. What I've learned, what my messages are, and how I want to improve your life. That's what I'm talking from. It's not that I didn't read a book about it, and this is a book report on public speaking. This is my hard-won experience that I'm sharing with you. I went over the 10 questions in my Finding Your Voice card, which are my speaking tips card, which is in the Finding Your Voice section. I said that's a free download. Lance Miller at lancemillerspeaks.com. You're welcome to download that. Now, there's a component in speaking that we don't talk about a lot in the Toastmasters environment. We talk a lot about our mechanics of speaking: opening, body, conclusion, stage movement, the mechanics of it, vocal variety, the mechanics of it. We talk a lot about the message development. But what we don't talk a lot about is your belief in the message, your conviction in the message, your intention with the audience. And these are things that are embodied in what I call our life force. It's the essence of the energy that we live life with. And without getting into a whole other topic or quantum physics or anything like that, we're a lot more than just flesh and bones. We have an energy that we imbue life with. And you know that there are people you will meet that when you get around them, you feel energized. You feel more enthusiastic and more excited to live life. And you also know that there are people, when they walk in the room, they have a tendency to suck the life energy out of you. I call these vampire personalities. You walk in the room and everything feels like, just like, God, I don't think I can go on anymore from now. And thus the essence of inspirational speaking, the word inspire means to breathe life into. If you're going to breathe life into somebody, you have to have life in yourself to breathe into them. So a lot of people will ask me, are you an inspirational speaker? And I say, well, whenever you speak, you should be inspirational. And I like to ask him, I said, have you ever heard an expirational speaker? That's someone who sucks the life out of you as he talks. Okay. The whole idea is to leave your audience in better shape than you found them. But with that, the way I define my life energy, and I call this our life force, it is the energy that we have to accomplish something. And as I said, it's not really of the physical realm. And it involves what I talk about, our convictions and our passions in life, what we really believe in. And conviction's an interesting word, because you can have conviction and you can get a conviction. And it's the same word, conviction. Okay, so let's look at this. I like to play with words a lot, and I'll just let you know, probably the best book I ever read in my life is called, if you haven't read it, I recommend it. So write this down. It's called The Dictionary. I dig into the dictionary all the time to really get the essence of what something means. So if we're going to get a conviction in a court of law, and I can't have dialogue with you right now, so I'm going to ask the rhetorical question and I'm going to answer it. If we're going to get a conviction in a court of law, how guilty do we have to prove the person to get the conviction? And the answer is, we have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and we can get conviction. So now let's flip that over on the other side. If we have conviction on something, we've examined it, and we have handled any reasonable doubts we have on that subject. So we have conviction on it. Now, what happens with us, well, I'll say what happens with me, and I think this is universal, is if we're up saying something to the audience, I talk about our life energy that we're putting out with, and my idea was to be able to speak without hesitation and without reservation to an audience, to be able to speak 100% to that. But if I'm unsure of what I'm telling them is the truth, I am going to start withholding my life energy from the audience because I have doubts and reservations about what I'm saying. I'm a little concerned someone's going to stand up and say, liar, that's not true. And I go, oh, they found out about me. So what I want to do is I want to examine anything I'm saying and handle any reasonable doubts or reservations I have about that, and I get my conviction. The next thing is my passions. I read a great book on passion. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's called The Dictionary. Same book. I saw the movie years ago, Passion of the Christ, where it was talked about Christ's crucifixion. And I couldn't understand how they could put the word passion in the title of that movie. So I looked it up in the dictionary. And the root word of passion is suffer. Now, I always thought passion was an intense liking or desire for something, but at the root it's suffering. And I realized that the things we have passion for in life, we're willing to suffer to do. We don't consider it suffering. So those things in my life I'm talking about, yeah, there's suffering involved in it, but because of the passion, I don't care that there's suffering involved in it. But the truth is you can talk to somebody with conviction and passion and you can blow their socks off. And you can knock them out of their seats. And this is like the fire and brimstone preacher that gets up and just takes a 2x4 to the audience and knocks the crap out of them. So the other part of life energy, life force to me is sincerity. And sincerity, it comes from a Greek word that means clean, and technically it means no wax, because the history behind sincere was they used to make these pottery pots in Greece, and the pot would crack now and then, and they'd take wax and they'd wax it together. That was an insincere pot. So if we have an ulterior motive to what we're trying to say, we're not being sincere with the audience. The essence of being sincere is being clean, which means we had a clean pot, no wax in it. So we have no wax in our message. We have a sincere message, clean message, we don't have any ulterior motives. And the second thing is humility, or being humble before the audience. And humility has a root word meaning ground, which means we stand on the same ground as the audience. We're not up here talking down to the audience, belittling the audience. We're on the same ground, or better yet, put the audience on the stage and speak up to the audience. One of the things I looked at, I said, what would my attitude be if my audience consisted of Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, those great social, societal leaders that had changed the world? Would I speak down to them? Would I tell them, let me tell you what you need to do to be successful in this life? Or would I say, it's such an honor to speak before you. Let me share a story of my life with you. You probably already know this lesson, but I want to share it with you. I would be very humble, but if I was to speak to them, I would speak to them, but I would speak to them, putting them on the audience. And that's the best approach to do with your audience. Don't assume that you're the smartest person in the room, because I'll guarantee you you're not. Well, I'll guarantee you this, that I'm not. You may be the smartest person in the room. I'm never the smartest person in the room. And I know that because I've had people come up and talk to me afterwards. And there's three things I look at. I'm not the smartest. I haven't been through the toughest situations, and I don't have the most experience. And when I see speakers that stand in front of an audience and try to talk down to the audience like they are giving them a solution that they've never thought of before. And then I have somebody come up and talk to me and say they really enjoyed my speech. She's a little lady about 5'2" that's 72 years old and just ran her 6th Boston Marathon. Or I have the person come up and give me a signed copy of their book on how they climbed Mount Everest on their 3rd attempt. I have a guy shake my hand and said that the lessons I was talking about, he learned in his 7.5 years in a prisoner of war camp in North Vietnam. Those are the people in my audience, and I'm supposed to be the smarter person. You never know who's sitting in your audience. So that's sort of where I start with this. Now, a couple other little points on message development. There's a lot of speakers that I coach that they have some traumatic event in their life. And I'm going to talk about cancer because cancer comes up all the time in speaking subjects. And I've coached probably in excess of 300 people in the Toastmasters International Speech Competitions. Your message is not about the cancer. You know, there's another thing I want to share with you. If you're picking a message, you have to look at where the mind of your audience is going to go. Now, in my live seminars, I will ask the audience, how many people here have had not you personally that you've had it, but how many people know someone who's had cancer? And almost always, I'm going to say at least 90% of the hands go up. And then I said, how many people here have lost someone close to them with cancer? And usually 80% of the hands go up. So when I talk to you about my cancer and how I survived it and how I overcame cancer, I'm basically invalidating the loved ones who you're going to be thinking about who didn't survive cancer. So the point is, be careful with the subjects you throw out there. But the real thing I want to get across to you with this point is that the message is not about the cancer. The message is not about you were wrongly incarcerated for 12 years for a murder you didn't commit. The message is not about the fact that you were unjustly fired. The message is not about the fact that you had a spouse that cheated on you or took all your money. That's not the message. The message is, how did you overcome what you felt was an insurmountable barrier in your life? And that barrier took the form of a spouse who cheated and took all your money. The barrier took the form of being unjustly fired. The barrier took the form of being wrongly incarcerated for murder, or the barrier took the form of a life-threatening disease, but you overcame it. What did you discover about yourself that allowed you to overcome that insurmountable barrier? That is your message, because the people in your audience are going to have a different barrier than you did. You want to give them the secret formula that you found out about yourself that allowed you to overcome the barrier so they can overcome their barrier. So that's one of the critical things to understand to really inspire an audience. It's not about the cancer. It's not about the traumatic event. It's what did you discover about yourself to overcome that insurmountable barrier? Okay, a couple aspects on delivery. Got about 8 more minutes here. I'm going to go over some stuff. On the delivery of your speeches, first of all, there's a big difference between narrating a speech and telling a story. And the telling the story is actually involving the audience. Narrating a speech is telling the audience about the story versus telling them the story. And as an example, you could, if you were narrating a speech, it would go something like, you know, when I was a child, I really didn't have any friends. My family life was really rough. I lived in a bad section of town, and I didn't have much hope for the future of my life. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with it. I'm telling you about my life. Now let me tell you a story. When I was 7 years old, I used to walk to school every day because my father was out sleeping with another woman and my mother was drunk in her bedroom. When I got to school, I got beat up by 3 or 4 bullies before I made it into my 2nd grade class. I was so hungry I couldn't think through the first half of the half of the day until I finally got lunch. And I remember we had to write a paper in 2nd grade about what we wanted to do for summer vacation. And I sat staring at that yellow lined piece of paper and didn't even think I would have a vacation. And I realized at that moment, I had no dreams in my life. Okay, I'm telling you this, let me tell you all about what was going on. The other is I'm telling you the story about what it was like to be there. I don't have time to go into this in great depth, but you want to tell the stories, not narrate your stories. It's like boring. You want to, and so many speakers try to put, we talk about involving the audience. There's a specific component that I'm not going to have time to get into today on how you tell a story. I'll be glad to come back and do that seminar at some point. Tell the story. Point number 2 on delivery. Speaking is not acting. I see this all the time where people go into an acting mode, and I have a minute to explain this to you. Acting is you drop a 4th wall and you invite the audience to watch you play off another person on the stage, and the audience is not there. That's acting. And the emotions that you're showing and the emotions that you're giving are based on the scene that is not in the present with the audience. The scene takes place at some other time, some other place. In speaking, you're talking to the audience, and everything you're doing is going back and forth with the audience. I have seen speakers receive a phone call that their father died and drop on the floor in withering grief, acting how they felt when they got the phone call. Now, you always want to maintain the dialogue and the talking to the audience. It's just like you're telling a friend a story. And if you were telling your friend a story and all of a sudden you went into this acting mode of, what do you mean you're not old enough? Well, I told you, I don't think that you're old enough. I am old enough. And you start going back and forth on something, they would go, this guy's absolutely freaking nuts with what he's doing. Okay. So in speaking, you're always talking to the audience. You're telling the story to the audience. You can put some dialogue in, but you're telling the story, but you're showing the dialogue to the audience. You're always including the audience. You don't drop that fourth wall. There's a lot we can talk about that. Okay, another viewpoint on delivery. There's a lot of speakers I see get up and they try to tell the audience something. As I said, you're not the smartest person. You're not the most experienced person. You're not the person that's been through the toughest situations in life. My attitude is to share with the audience what I've learned, to share with them. And so they can sit there and we feel like we're all in this together. Let me share with you what I've learned. I'm not trying to force anything on you, because the best way you can get someone to receive your message is if they accept it of their own free will versus having it being forced upon them. So I share, and hopefully I can share it well enough that they'll go, wow, that makes sense. I'm going to use that. And the last thing I want to touch on, which I've already talked about just a little bit, is I bring this up because I've had some speakers bring this up with me, is that they are trying to be sensational. They want to be sensational to the audience. Well, the question is, who determines if your speech was sensational? You or the audience? The audience determines if your speech is sensational. You don't make it sensational. It's better to be sincere than sensational, because a sincere speech will be perceived as a sensational speech by the audience. But if you try to be on stage and do something that's bigger than life so that everybody goes, wow, that was sensational, it's only sensational in your mind. And unfortunately, your mind doesn't count. The mind of the audience is the only mind that counts. Okay, a couple other things that I just will hit on, and I see the timing cards are coming up here, which is great. I've got a number of points, but let me go over a couple. One is, I don't believe in asking questions in speeches unless we can answer them. Asking a question is like opening up a window on your computer. It eats up the memory of the audience. If you go, what was the biggest thing that's ever happened in your life? Or what was the toughest day you've ever had? And you don't get that answer back from them. You just made them think about something and you didn't give them an opportunity to answer the question. It's actually a rude thing to do. The next thing I want to talk about just real briefly is the use of quotes. A lot of people will use a quote where they'll bring Abraham Lincoln or Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. to the speech and say, because Gandhi said. And it's a little bit like saying, you're not going to believe me, but I'm going to bring Gandhi here and Gandhi will tell you that what I'm saying is the truth. So when I use quotes, the quote shouldn't go from Gandhi to the audience. The quote should come from Gandhi to me. How did that quote affect me? And then I share with you how I was inspired by that quote. When I read that Gandhi said, you need to be the change you want to see in the world, I realized I had no permission to complain about what I saw. I just needed to change and be the example. You share with the audience how the quote affected you and then tell that to the audience. Don't have Gandhi tell it directly to the audience. That way you remain the source communicator, the author of your speech, and you don't bring Gandhi into the liquid to dilute it down. The last thing I want to touch on is use of props. A lot of speaking deals with attention and holding the attention of the audience. And the perfect speech is the audience's attention is all on you and your attention is on the audience. You're not sitting there going, where's the green card? I wish I'm not speaking. And my question is to anybody, have you ever been timer and forgot to time? Well, what happens is the speaker got all your attention. And all of a sudden you're going, oh no, green, yellow, red. What's going on? So you have this attention thing going. Well, probably the biggest prop I've ever seen used in Toastmasters is a chair. And you put a chair on stage and you walk around giving your talk and half the audience's attention is on the chair. What's he going to do with the chair? Where is he with the chair? You just put your audience's attention on something on the stage That has nothing to do with your speech. So my simple rule for props is this: they should appear when you need them and disappear when you don't. And most props are not needed. The prop needs to make a specific point. 99% of the people that use chairs on stage do not need to sit down. They can share that story through oratory excellence, which is what we are trying to attain. I'll take a break now. We'll hear from Dana, and then we'll take any Q&A afterwards. I hope you found that worthwhile. Thank you.
Answered the Q&A is now for you.
Oh, Q&A is now. Great. Fantastic.
So fellow members, if you have questions, please send them to me in the chat, and I will read them off. Okay, so far.
There's a couple of things I can mention if people want to have, if you have some questions. And again, I'm glad to answer anything I can. But John, do you have a question, or where are we?
Okay, we have a question, which is, how important is it to add humor to your speech?
Well, humor, let me just put it this way. Speaking is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. And for me, humor is the audience speaking back. Okay. And it's also, just from that standpoint, it's very rude to interrupt the audience when they're talking. So one of the things I see speakers do is that they practice their speech a certain way, and then they get a laugh that they didn't expect, and they just keep talking right over the top of the laugh. It's actually rude to the audience. You need to let the audience laugh when they laugh. But I think humor, and I'm doing a whole series of speaking tips right now on humor on my email list. I don't know how many I've got. I've got 15 real specific tips on how to put humor in your speeches. I think it's critical to speeches. And NSA, a lot of times they talk about, well, it depends if you want to get paid or not. That's how important it is. But the thing I want to tell you about humor needs to forward the message of your speech. And it doesn't need to just be humor for humor's sake. So there are a number of ways to say things that disrupt the thinking of the audience. And the essence of humor is a surprise that the audience did not expect. And that's what causes them to all of a sudden laugh, because they never compared those two things or looked at something a certain way. That keeps them engaged, and it keeps the dialogue going, because just like you're charging a battery, if you charge it one way too long, the battery will explode. Well, if you stand and talk to an audience and all the energy is going this way into the audience for too long, the person feels like, they're going to explode. You need to have a dialogue going with your audience. And that's really what the humor allows you to do. And so part of good speaking is really creating a dialogue situation. Now, understand, we don't want the audience talking to us, but there's a number of ways to get the audience to react back and forth. Ask a question like, did anybody here grow up in a family and the hands go up? And you just had dialogue with the audience. So you get them to contribute with what you're doing. But humor is very important, but it needs to be done properly.
Okay, we have a couple related questions. The two questions are, how do I adapt to a new audience? How to read the audience in real time during the speech?
First of all, how to adapt to a new audience, you need to do your homework. That's the first thing. There's three things and this is on my speaking tips card, three things I want to know when I'm going to speak. What's the venue? What's my message? And who's the audience? And so you have to know what's going on with that audience. As far as how to read the audience in real time, my experience is, at least I'll just say, when I'm in the audience reading them in real time, I'm usually wrong. Because Toastmasters audiences are the greatest audiences in the world, because they're for you. They know how to be an audience member. A lot of people don't know how to be an audience member. And I was giving a talk at a Rotary Club one time, and I was president of an international nonprofit foundation that taught universal character and ethics principles in 110 languages. I'm at a Rotary Club early one morning giving a talk about the importance to teach youth ethics and character principles in life and how that fits into society. And there was a gentleman sitting at the table right up front, shaking his head through the whole thing. And he kept looking at his watch and shaking his head, looking at his watch and shaking his head. And then about 5 or 6 minutes before the end of my talk, he got up and walked out of the room. Now, if you were the speaker, what would you think? You think that's a happy guy that likes the message, or you think he's sitting there going, I can't take this anymore. How much longer is this guy going to talk? Jesus, what's going on? You know, and fine, I can't take it anymore. I'm leaving. And quite honestly, it was disrupting me quite a bit, but I was keeping my composure, but I wanted to go, what's wrong with you? You know? So I went up to the president afterwards and I said, was I saying something that upset that man? He goes, oh no, he wanted to stay through your whole talk. He's an attorney at a court appearance this morning. He stayed as long as he could. So what was he doing? He was going, dang on it, I don't want to leave. How much longer can I stay? How much longer can I stay? He stayed to the last minute and then he shot out of there really fast. So I delivered another speech to an elderly group, again, on values and society, and they were completely wooden. I didn't get a smile. I didn't get a laugh. I didn't get a nod. They were like, and I sat there and I go, oh God, they hate me. And I came up afterwards and I had a table of our ethics and character and ethics books. Like 15 or 20 people came up and going, my grandson needs that. Do you have any for my grandkids? That's the best program we've ever had. I'm just going to tell you, you just deliver from your heart as straight as you can. And don't think you're doing great, because I've had the other happen where I think everybody's like laughing and stuff like that. Then I have 15 people come up and say, you really insulted me on this, or, you know, all sorts of problems came out of it. It's very difficult to read an audience. You deliver what you need to deliver to the best degree you can, no matter what's going on. And then you figure it out afterwards.
Okay, we have another question, which is, how have you dealt with nervousness before talks you've given?
A couple of things. First of all, know your audience, know your venue, know your message. That's really what I focus on. Do I know what I'm going to say? Most of my nervousness comes from being uncertain about the audience, uncertain about my message, or the venue is screwed up and I'm uncertain about how the venue is going to work. Okay, that's where my nervousness comes from. That being said, I consider speaking a muscle, and I had to build my muscle strong enough that I wasn't nervous about the speaking part of it. I knew I had the skills to speak, and I did that through Toastmasters. So I had several years, and now I did that with competition, being super nervous with speaking. And I finally got confidence in speaking, and I was able to identify then the things that would make me nervous were uncertainty on the delivery based on the audience message or venue. Those were the three things. If those are in line, like my Toastmasters stuff, I love it. I've done so much of it. I know the audience, just like this. I'm not nervous about that. If I was speaking to a group of CPAs or chartered accountants, God save me, I'd probably be nervous because I'm not sure how they're going to react to what I'm talking about. I want to make sure I'm relating to them, and I don't understand their mindset as well as I understand a Toastmasters mindset. But with that, I also want to let you know, you don't get over your nervousness with 10 speeches. As I said, I used to do 3 speaking levels a year. When I won the world championship, I'd done over 200 coached speeches in Toastmasters. And I had probably spoken 600 or 700 times outside of Toastmasters. You get over speaking nerves by speaking. And Toastmasters is a great place to build that message, build that strength.
All right, thank you. I'll do one more question and then we'll go back to Hung. The final question is, since in-person speeches don't always translate virtually, especially in delivery, what tips can you share as world champ of public speaking now that the contest is remote and online?
Well, first of all, I've never competed remote and online, but I've done a lot of Zoom long before COVID. I've got a World Champion Speakers Online Summit where I've interviewed 30 of the existing world champions for an hour, between 1 and 2 hours on each one of those. I've done a lot of different delivery, a lot of meetings online. I'm going to go back to your life force and your energy. I'm hoping that you're seeing during this talk, I have a lot of energy I'm putting into the talk. And it's though I'm speaking to a large group of people. If you're sitting on a Zoom call and all you're doing is looking at the camera right here, and my microphone's right above me here, and I'm going, oh, I'm looking at the camera, and all the only projection I'm doing with my voice and my direction on my speech is right to that camera. I'm not speaking through the camera to the people. You need to put your energy, you need to show your conviction, you need to have your passion, you need to be excited about the communication you're going to deliver and realize that you are delivering to living, breathing human beings on the other side of this electronic medium that we're in. And if all you're doing is talking to a computer screen, who wants to listen to a person talking to a computer screen? You know, that's the most boring thing in the world. You can go to the library and watch people talk to their computer screen. So you realize you're still delivering to living, breathing human people. And this is, I mean, I have a lot of speaking experience before we got into the Zoom world. I don't know what it would be like for me right now without having 25 years of experience before I had to start doing Zoom calls. And if I had to start my speaking career on Zoom, that would be a completely different set of circumstances completely. But the big thing I would tell you is you still need the same amount of conviction, the same amount of real live communication with all the proper pause, vocal variety, all the different delivery issues that you have as though you were speaking live. But there is something different when you have the live people in front of you. You can see the nod, or you can see the smile, you can see the reaction. Because quite honestly, a lot of times people like on Zoom right now, you can sit there and listen to me and feel like he can't see me. I don't know what I'm going to do. Now, a couple of you are smiling and nodding, and that makes it great for you as a speaker. And I realize, okay, I'll look at the 2 or 3 people that are smiling and nodding with me. The other people that are like, you know, they're stoically sitting there, you know, that you could pour a bucket of cold water in their face and they're not going to move. I'm not going to look at them. I'm going to look at the people that are smiling and nodding. I'm getting some feedback from. Okay. Simplicity on the answer, you still pour your energy into it. Realize you're talking to human beings. You're not talking to a computer. And we're all going to have to figure this thing out as we go along. And I'm going to just leave you with this. We hear a lot about Zoom fatigue. I was on a NSA call, which is a National Speakers Association call, a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about Zoom fatigue. And one of the people said is, well, Zoom fatigue is another name for crappy presentations. And that's really the truth. I hope none of you have Zoom fatigue on this call, because I'm putting a lot of energy into the call and I'm talking to you and I'm in the present. But if it was a crappy presentation and I sat here and I went, well, you know, I think probably one of the most important things that we all need to do as speakers is, you know, is to be authentic to our message. And, you know, if I went through that for the next, what are we gonna have, 40 minutes? You guys will all be blanking out. And, you know, all I would see is like names on the screen, right? No, you got to put your life into it. This is live communication. You're talking to human beings. You happen to have a via of zeros and ones that's taking your message out there, but you're talking to human beings. So understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll turn the meeting back over to Hung.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Lance, for condensing all of that information in such a short time compared to your normal speaking time slot. We really appreciate it and appreciate your time. Next, I would like to invite James Hick to introduce our second world champion of public speaking guest. Jim. Jim, we cannot hear you.
Now, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay,
yes.
Good. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, Dana LaMon. Dana has been a member of Toastmasters for 33 years. He is currently a member of the speakers in the WIN Toastmasters in District 33. He is a 1992 World Champion of Public Speaking and is also an accredited speaker since 1993. Dana, who was reared in Compton, California, became blind when he was 4 years old. He graduated from Yale University in 1974 and the University of Southern California Law School in 1997. He is a retired administrative law judge. Dana is the author and publisher of 4 books, the most popular of which is the excellent book, 104 Principles of Living and Working. By the way, I just ordered that book. Dana's presentation this afternoon is entitled Next Step in Excellence. Please join me in welcoming distinguished Toastmaster, world champion, accredited speaker, Dana LaMon.
Thank you very much, Jim. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, when I was a young teenager, I used to regularly visit my neighbor, Maud Riley. And I liked visiting Maud because she would give me jobs, tasks to do that other people wouldn't allow me to do. Other people look at me and say, oh, he's blind, and they think he can't. But Maud Riley gave me work to do just as she would give anybody. If I went to visit Maud and she was clipping rose bushes, she'd give me a pair of shears and say, here, Dana, clip this bush. She'd show me to pull the weeds. She'd say, this is a plant, this is a weed. I need you to pull the weeds. If she were in the kitchen, she'd say, you want to wash the dishes or dry them? We'll work together. One day I visited Maud and she didn't have to tell me what she was doing. My nose told me that. As soon as I stepped on her front porch, I smelled paint. The door was open. I could hear work going on inside. I said, Maud, I can tell you're painting. I'll come back when you are less busy. She said, oh no, come in, Dana. I have a job for you. When I went in, Maud gave me a roller. She showed me where the pan of paint was. She showed me the step ladder. She said, I want you to paint the ceiling. And okay. And so I would dip the roller in the paint and I would move back and forth as I painted strips on that ceiling. It was a rectangular ceiling. I was pretty knowledgeable in geometry and math. So I was able to cover that ceiling with the white paint that she had asked me to use. We finished up the walls, and after the whole process was over and we were cleaning, I said, Maud, why did you have me to begin with the ceiling? She said, well, before you came, I was trying to paint the ceiling. I was covered in plastic and I'm looking up, and when I looked up, paint would splatter in my face. She said, I figured you'd be able to paint it and you wouldn't have to look up. When Maud gave me a job to do, she always quoted a poem. She would say, if a job is once begun, leave it not until it's done. Be the task great or small, do it well or not at all. And that was the seed that was planted, the seed of excellence that guided me through all that I have done. You've heard Jim say in the introduction some of the accomplishments. What guided me along always was the notion of excellence. And even now, as a professional speaker, I have the chance to travel around the world. I've spoken in Indonesia, Malaysia, China, Australia. I've spoken in 36 states of the United States. I speak to corporations. I speak to kindergarten students. I have not yet found anyone who would argue against the notion of excellence. No one. You can check the core values of so many different organizations and find out that excellence is part of that core value. But I haven't found agreement as to what excellence is. And I know that I haven't found an agreement on that because of the language that is used when people refer to excellence. So as I talk this afternoon about excellence and the next step in excellence, I want to make sure that you understand at least where I'm coming from when I talk about excellence. First of all, excellence is not perfection. Despite what you might hear me say from time to time, no one in this world is perfect. And so to think that excellence might be perfection would actually be suggesting that we're working towards something that could never be achieved. Excellence is not perfection. You're likely to make mistakes if you're committed to excellence. If you're committed to excellence, though, you will learn from the mistakes. Excellence is not a goal or a destination. It is not something for which you strive. So often I hear people say, I am striving for excellence. Excellence has to be a commitment within you. It has to be the process that you have agreed to at the start of a journey in order for excellence to be in the end results. So you don't speak striving for excellence. I didn't title this presentation Next Step for Excellence. You strive in excellence. And so today we're going to talk about the next steps in excellence. Excellence is not a matter of being. Being is a judgment that, when it comes to excellence, is made by someone else. Excellence is about what you do and your commitment to do it. So excellence is a commitment, and if it's a commitment to others, which it can be, it could be a commitment to your fellow Toastmasters, it could be commitment to your coworkers or your family. It is a principle that you will use as guidance on what you do, so that when someone looks at you and they say, well, you know, John said that he is going to do such and such, you know that it's going to be excellent work that John produces, because that's the commitment that John has made, and people can look at him and see that's what he's done. Excellence as a commitment to yourself becomes part of your identity. I have developed my I am statements as a way to identify who I am. And one of those statements says, I am excellence. To perform with my best effort everything I do. It's a commitment to others. It's a commitment to yourself. And this afternoon, I want to talk about what will result from that commitment. First of all, improvement. Your commitment to excellence is also a commitment to continual improvement. In my excellence book, or let me say it this way, give the correct title, in the excellence book, 104 Principles for Living and Working, principle number 1 says, to excel is to do better today than you did yesterday. That's all you're required to do. Do better today than you did yesterday. Don't be perfect. That's not what I'm asking you to do. Do better today than you did yesterday in your Toastmasters experience. Doesn't matter what you did in the speech in the last club meeting. The question is, the next time you're scheduled to speak, what do you do? And if you do better, call that excellence. So there's improvement that you will go for. I'll tell you, I was introduced as the 1992 world champion, but I also performed in the 1991 world championship. And in 1991, I came in second place. And I was perfectly happy about it. I'm sure that most people in this audience, if you were able to put in your resume, I came in second place in the World Championship of Public Speaking, that would satisfy you. I was satisfied, but I had fellow Toastmasters who called me to encourage me to compete again. And I was very hesitant to do so. And one of the reasons that I was hesitant to do so is my commitment to excellence, my commitment to do better today than I did yesterday. And I'm thinking, okay, you came in second place. There's only one position better than second place. So if I were to enter the contest again, I must be making a commitment to be number one. And then I thought about it. I said, no, Dana, you're not committing to be. You're committing to do. And so figure out what you did in your last performance and work out a way to do better. Obviously it worked. 1992, I came in first place. Continual improvement is what results from your commitment to excellence. What also results from your commitment to excellence is development. Excellence seeks to discover and develop your hidden and unused talents. Every one of us here was placed on this earth for a purpose. And with that purpose came your talents and abilities. And throughout your life, one of the interesting challenges about life is continually discovering what those talents and abilities are, or developing those talents and abilities. You know, I was in, by the time I joined Toastmasters and started working on developing my speaking skills, I had already achieved the position of being a judge. But stopping at having passed the bar exam and gotten a job as a judge, that wouldn't have been good enough. Because as life goes on, you have to continue to grow. So you continue to look for other skills, other things that you can do, that you can develop. That's part of that commitment to excellence. So when you're committed to excellence, you're committed to continual learning. You're committed to welcome change. You're committed to taking risks, because this is how you discover new things that you can do. And until you try something new, you won't know how well you would have been able to do it. So what's holding you back in your Toastmasters experience? Next Step Toastmasters is a way for you to find the next step. What are you doing with all of the opportunities that are available, even after you achieve some specific educational goal? Have you written an article for the magazine? Have you competed in one of the speech contests? Have you held a leadership position at the district level, international level, perhaps even president of Toastmasters International? There's always a next step. And so if you're committed to excellence, you seek to discover that. You know, I got involved in Toastmasters because a friend of mine asked me to give a speech at his wedding. And there's nothing wrong with that. I had been speaking at schools and so I was ready to do it until he said he wanted a humorous speech at his wedding. Now there was something I didn't know. I didn't have the advantage of Lance Miller's 15 principles on how to put humor in your speech that's available through his newsletters. I lost sleep for 2 nights trying to figure out, how do you intentionally make people laugh? It turns out the speech was successful, and after the speech, someone said to me, "You should join Toastmasters." Well, I didn't know what Toastmasters was at the time, but we looked in a newspaper and there was an advertisement or an announcement about a club meeting that very evening. So I went to Toastmasters that very evening. And I was fascinated with what I heard. And I saw, yes, there was an opportunity. Perhaps I could practice putting humor in my presentations. I learned later I should also practice with some gestures and structure and all kinds of things. But it was the first step to developing my speaking skills. And then I discovered my speaking talent was something I could use to fulfill a purpose in life to help others to find meaningful living. When you're committed to excellence, you're committed to developing and discovering those hidden and unused talents. When you're committed to excellence, you're committed to making adjustments. Principle number 66 in the Excellence book says, excellence makes adjustments where mediocrity makes excuses. I became blind when I was 4 years old. I was running backwards and I fell on the back of my head. It caused an injury to the head, and I was taken to the hospital where that was taken care of. When they sent me home, my mother discovered something else was wrong because of my behavior in the house, bumping into walls and furniture and areas with which I should have been familiar, and I was walking around like I didn't know it. She took me back to the hospital, and that's where they discovered that I had become completely blind. It turned out that I had retina detachments. Later in life, we discovered that it's a hereditary condition within my family. So there are several family members that have retina problems. I'm the one with the problem of complete blindness as a result of it. But I became blind when I was 4 years old. And I learned very early on that people's expectation of me was quite low. And what I heard frequently was, he's blind, he can't. He's blind, he can't. I was in a perfect position to make excuses whenever I didn't want to do something. I decided instead that I would prove to people that I can. Of course, sometimes I was drawn into that excuse pit. You know, I remember sometimes when I was in junior high school and I would make the excuse that the reason why my homework wasn't done was that it was too cold. You see, if you're too cold, your index fingers with which you read Braille, you can't read the Braille anymore. I tell my teacher it was too cold, I couldn't read the Braille. And I remember in law school, the contracts professor called on me. He didn't know the pronunciation of my name, but I figured it was pretty close when he said, Zhana LaMon? And I said, yes, sir. He wanted me to tell him the facts in Harvey v. Baxendale. I said, Professor, I'm sorry, I don't know the facts in that case. I rely on recorded material because I'm blind, and the recording of the book hasn't arrived yet. So I haven't had a chance to read the case. He apologized. He said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you. And then his second thought, would you let me know when the book is available? And I'm thinking to myself, is this man serious? And when was that? I graduated from law school, 1977. And to this day, he's still waiting to find out if I've received the book. I was not going to tell him. If I could get out of answering questions in law school, I'm not going to tell him when the book arrives. So those are the things I did. But when you're committed to excellence, you don't make excuses. It has nothing to do with the financial situation, the education situation, the pandemic situation, the Zoom situation. Those are just excuses. Notwithstanding what we had to go through in 2020, if you are committed to excellence, you know that the next step is to make adjustments. All right, so I've covered improvement, development, adjustments. I've got one more. Actually, I've got two more. The next one is movement. If you're committed to excellence, you're willing to move. Excellence doesn't stand still. And the best way, the greatest force that would help you to move is change. When things change, we should be willing to also change instead of resisting or fighting change. Principle number 32 in the Excellence book says, excellence welcomes change. Because change is where you have a chance to grow, to find out what you might have done or what you could do that you didn't believe you could do. When my son, Anton, was 14 years old, and I guess we learn lessons when we're 14. I learned my lessons about excellence from Maud Riley when I was about 14. When Anton was 14, the family made the decision to move to Indiana. Well, I wasn't going to move to Indiana. I was working here in California. I was employed by the state of California, so I was going to stay in California. But the rest of the family was going to move to Indiana so that my wife at the time could pursue education at Indiana University. So we had a family meeting to talk about it. And even before the meeting took place, Anton wanted me to reveal the secret about what the meeting was going to be about. And I wouldn't tell him. I said, no, Anton, I can't tell you. You have to wait till your mom comes back and she'll tell you. He said, no, come on, Dad, you can tell me. And I said, Anton, I cannot tell you. And he said, you can tell me. I'm not going to tell anyone. Well, I refused to tell him. And then he said, Dad, well, if it has anything to do with moving, I'm all for it. And then I was curious. He caught my attention because Anton was born Lancaster, California, which is where I still live today. Up until that point, Anton had not even moved. His bedroom hadn't changed. And he's saying, if it's about moving, I'm all for it. So I asked him, why are you all for it? He said, Dad, don't you know, when you change your environment, you change your opportunities. There's the lesson. Now, when Anton said it, I tried to think back of when I had said it. I said, surely it's something he heard me say. And I've taken him to some of my speaking engagements, but I couldn't remember ever having said it. It came from him. Now, when I tell him now that I'm going to use that, he says he's going to expect me to pay royalties for his statement. When you change your environment, you change your opportunities. So if you're committed to excellence, for you, the next step might be movement. And finally, when you're committed to excellence, you're committed to push a little harder in the face of opposition. We'll call that tenacity. Opposition comes, you're willing to reach deep inside you and say, I know I've got a little bit more I can offer, a little bit more, because only you can determine whether you have given your best. That's why principle number 2 says, excellence demands that you do your best, not that you be the best. To be the best requires the judgment of someone else. To do the best, only you can know. Only you know whether you gave it the most energy, whether you reached deep inside you. What's left that you can add one more push? So there it is, 5 possible steps I've offered to you. If you're committed to excellence, that is to say, continual improvement, committed to discovering your hidden unused talents, committed to making adjustments instead of excuses, committed to movement, that is to welcome change as an opportunity to grow, or committed to push a little harder or reach a little deeper to give it your best performance. Fellow Toastmasters.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. LaMon. That was excellent, brilliantly put together. Team, if you have questions, put them in the chat box and I'll be glad to voice them so we can get answers to your questions. Here's one. When did you first have your commitment to excellence?
I can't specifically identify a date, a month, a year. As I said in the outset, Maud Riley quoting that poem about do it well or not at all certainly stuck with me. And because I am blind, I was required to apply it. I knew that other people's expectation was for something lower. They did not expect a blind person could achieve this or achieve that. So way back when, even in my secondary, elementary, probably not elementary, secondary, high school years, I knew that I would have to use excellence as the standard by which I functioned to show people, yes, I'm blind, but the words to apply to my blindness is he can, not he can't.
Thank you for that. Not seeing a lot of questions here. Bring them on, team. No, you must have some questions about his brilliance, his philosophy on excellence.
And it doesn't have to just focus on excellence, by the way. I mean, you have two world champions here. You had a chance to listen to Lance and his process. If you want to ask me questions about participating in the world championship or going to law school or whatever, feel free.
Okay, here we go. How did you discover your truths?
I spend a lot of time sitting at my desk thinking about why I do or why I did. Sometimes, and no matter what it is, if I lost my temper and yelled at someone, I'd sit down, why did I do that? Or if, no matter what the situation is, I'd say, why did I do that? Or why did she do that? Or why did he say that? I ask a lot of whys, and that's how I discover it. And then some of that I put in presentations and see how people react to it. And then I find that they're universal principles, they're human behavior.
Excellent. Here's one. How did you recognize that blindness does not have to limit you?
The interesting thing about that is it turns out I just happen to be a very stubborn person. Along with being blind, I was also born with this nature of wanting to prove someone wrong. So if you made a statement, and particularly depending on how you said it, if you made a statement and you said it with such authority that there's no way it can be challenged, you can guarantee that Dana LaMon's going to figure out a way to challenge it. So that's what happened to me growing up. When people said he's blind, he can't, I'm going to prove them wrong. I love to prove people wrong. I'm going to prove them wrong. And so that's what I do. I'd figure out, I'm going to tell you, I have flown an airplane because I live in an area, Antelope Valley of Los Angeles County, and it's an aerospace territory. We have Boeing and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed and Edwards Air Force Base here. And a lot of people fly planes. You could talk to the clerk in the grocery store and find out they have a plane and they fly. So one day I said, I want to fly. I said that to a Toastmaster who I happened to to coach in a speech contest. I didn't know she was a pilot. And I didn't know that her husband instructed pilots. So she went home and told her husband, Dana wants to fly a plane. And her husband said, I can figure out how we can make that happen. So I had an opportunity back in 2011 to fly an airplane.
Awesome, awesome. I have another one here. Oh boy, I love it. It says your speech was very powerful. How do you stay motivated and focused while blocking out the negativity around you?
You actually have to commit yourself to that. I'll tell you, I'm not 100% motivated and 100% focused. I need people to say encouraging things to me as well. And fortunately, I've surrounded myself with people who are willing to do it and can do it. And I try to avoid those people who are going to be negative. Lance, you heard Lance talk about those expirational people who just suck the energy out of you. And I don't like negativism at all. And so if I find myself interacting with someone who seems to be regularly negative, then I distance myself from them. I try to avoid having to work with them or deal with them, even if they're family members.
Thank you for that. Here's a question. When speaking in contest, how do you handle staying within the time limit?
So here's a key thing. When I prepared my world championship speech, I knew it's a 5 to 7 minute speech. And they'll give me a 30-second grace period. So I could go 7 minutes and 30 seconds. It would be foolish of me to do that. So I planned and prepared a speech that was 6 minutes and 30 seconds and allowed myself just to get up there and deliver it because I knew with all confidence that I had a speech that was less than the prescribed time limit.
Here's a
Jim,
question.
I want to jump in here for a second with Dana. And I don't know if Dana remembers this, but in 2003, I technically won the regionals in Las Vegas, but I won over 1 second.
Oh.
And Dana was there and I was talking to him and I sat down and I was like, oh man, Dana. And Dana in his brilliance looks at me and he goes, Lance, it's a 5 to 7 minute speech contest, not 7.5 minutes. And I sat there and I felt like the biggest fool in the world because I was trying to squeeze every second out of that speech I could. And it was because they give you a 30-second leeway at the end. It's a 5 to 7. It was the simplest truth I needed to hear. And I don't know if you remember that, Dana, but that was a lesson I needed to learn because I always tried to push all my speeches to 5 minutes and 25 seconds if I could. So,
you know what, Lance, it's funny that you said, I'm glad that you mentioned it because I remember saying it to someone and I couldn't remember who I said it to. But I'm going to tell you, I have to tell you the story. I saw a guy, unfortunate. Well, it's not unfortunate. I saw a guy who happened to also be blind. He was in an international speech contest and there were only 2 contestants. The other contestant, there was no way the contestant was going to win. The other contestant happened to have a developmental disability. And it's just, I mean, you could tell there's no way that speech wasn't going to do it. It was just inspiring for the person to even attempt. So this person, all they had to do is go 4 minutes and 30 seconds and sit down and the contest was theirs. He went overtime.
All right, here's one here. What was one of the biggest issues that you struggle with to speak at the level you wanted to speak at?
Oh, well, my biggest issue is the issue I still work with, of course, is gestures. As you can tell from this presentation, this is not an example or an exemplar in gesture. Don't show the video to anybody if you're teaching gestures, okay? So that's a challenge for me. It's still a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge. Gestures don't come to me naturally. And since I can't see other speakers, I can't even copycat what people do in their gestures. So I would say that, at the outset, that was a challenge. Now technology is the challenge. Technology is moving so fast. There are companies that make adaptive equipment for blind people, but it's always trailing behind the technology. And so by the time I get to the point that I learn the technology, something new has come up. So those are two challenges that I still deal with.
Okay, let's round the Q&A with this question. How do you hone your speaking skills?
Keep speaking. Keep speaking. And not only do you keep speaking, but know why you're speaking, and then sit down and evaluate the results. And when I say evaluate the results, when I first got into professional speaking, they said, prepare your evaluation forms. Make sure you circulate the evaluation form and have people give you feedback. Well, I got evaluation forms back and they circled the 5. They circled the 5. Everybody's circling the 5. That's not helping me. You circle the 5. I want to hear what impact, what word did I say? What phrase, what story stuck with you, helped you, or didn't work? That's what I want to hear. So when I prepare a presentation, give a presentation, I know what I want to say. I know what impact I want it to have. And so I'm looking for feedback as to whether I had that impact. If I get it, good. I say, okay, I can repeat that. If I don't get it, I'm going to say, okay, fine. What did I do wrong? Did I tell that story wrong? Or was it just the wrong audience? You've got to be willing to analyze it. Now, so as a result, I record everything I do and I go back and I play it to see. Now, I definitely don't go back and play it right away because I can't be as objective from it as possible. So I might play it 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, or I might not play it back again until I'm asked to give a similar speech. But I'll go back and I'll play it and say, okay, I'm listening to the audience. They got it, they didn't get it. Well, maybe I should change this or change that.
Thank you so much for being here with us as a guest. You've given us so much to ponder, to work on, the insight. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Mr.